when you get up in front of an audience, you try to tell a story, it can be challenging. And try to get the story told in such a way that it interconnects with your audience. And maybe you think back on the story and what you said, what you did, and it all becomes kind of jumbled. You start thinking, okay, I want to tell a story. So 5 years ago, there I was walking down the street. I was thinking about things that were going on, and I was a little bit annoyed about them. And I talked with a friend, and they had some things to say. We went back and forth and talked about some different stuff. And after a while, we decided that maybe we should do things differently. And that began a whole new kind of way of approach of things that I was going to be doing. As you tell a story, even yourself, you're thinking, something's missing. I don't know what it is, but there's something missing with this story. And that's the thing about stories, is that you sense and hear when things aren't right. You may not know what it is exactly, but there's something wrong, and you get it in here. You feel something just isn't quite working with the story. And this is a frustrating thing for a lot of people about telling stories, why they try maybe to avoid them in speeches. Because it just seems like a big hassle, and all along you think it's just not right. There's something missing. And you're absolutely right. Something is missing. A few things are missing. Things so basic, so crucial, so necessary, so natural, that they're very easily overlooked. And because they're easily overlooked, you tell a story that just doesn't quite measure up. You don't know why. You get frustrated at it. You think, it's just not going to work. It's not a story. Forget about it. Maybe just give up entirely. But if you just understood a few basic things, you could tell that story in a way that's engaging and that's interesting. So that's what you're going to learn about today, that those missing things, those things that are so apparent, so necessary, they so much need to be done, but people just don't get it. Not because they don't understand, but because they don't think about it. It's so obvious, it's so natural, it's so intuitive. They just don't really think about it. And that's the challenge of a story. It's so natural, it's so obvious. And when you need to tell the story, you don't know the basic things that need to be done because they're too obvious. You had something so obvious, you just didn't think about it, so automatic, somehow you didn't remember it at the right time. That's the case with a story. Really basic things that need to be understood, that you intrinsically in here understand, but you also need to understand in here too. But the good news is once you hear them, you get them instantly. It's like, oh, yeah, of course, right. Yeah, sure. Then you start to use them, and it's even more impactful. It's all about getting that engagement, getting that story, making that connection with your audience. And you can do it. You can make that happen, make that a reality. If you understand a few basic things, if you think about the things you're not thinking about, and just bring them up here. When you go to tell a story, you're trying to put all the parts together, You start thinking about it and figuring out what happened the way it occurred. And sometimes the present seems to have a lot to do with the past. So if something happened 5 years ago and something else happened 10 years ago, the story becomes kind of, well, it was 5 years ago and I was walking down the street that day, many years ago. I didn't know what to do or what to say in that situation. And then I thought of something happened earlier, and that really kind of changed me, just that awareness of that thing that happened earlier. And as I was walking, I thought about all the different things going on. And as you go through that story, you start going through it, looking through it, figuring out the different things that happened. It occurs to you that it's just not hanging together somehow. It's just not really coming together as a story. Not certainly the sort of thing you could tell in front of other people. Because again, there's this basic thing going on, this challenge. Because of the past. And because of the way stories occur. The thing about stories is they occur all over the place. It's their nature. Something happens and triggers other things to happen, and triggers that thing to happen, and this happened, and those things happen, and it just kind of bounces all around. That's the nature of a story. And when you tell it, you want to try to go along and figure out, okay, well, this happened, and but wait a minute, this happened before then, and I remember that happened before because of that, and then I was going to do this thing, and then those things happened, and you just kind of bounce around because that's the way it occurred. But the thing about a story, to make a story most effective, is you don't want to bounce around too much. What you really want to do is tell things in chronological order. Something happened, and something else happened, and something else happened, and something else happened. Now, it's possible the story didn't actually occur like that. Maybe something happened, and then 5 years later something happened, another thing happened. From the point of view of your story, see if you can kind of collapse all that into this something happened, and the next, and the next, and the next. Because that's the way people experience life. Something happens, and then something happens after that, and something happens after that. That's the way life is. So by having your story go in the same chronological, the same something happens in the next, and the next, and the next, and the next, as life does, all of a sudden your story becomes believable. Because your story mimics life. Your story happens the same way life does. Something and something else and something else and something else. Regardless of how complex your story actually is, find a way to do it in some sort of chronological order. And it may mean you collapse time or expand time depending. But if things happen in that order, people will get it. They'll understand. They'll think, oh, okay, this happened and that happened, that happened. All right, I understand where that's going. All right. Okay. All right so far. And it will get you so far. Just having things in chronological order automatically makes your story come a little bit more alive. Be a little more real. But there's something else you can do to make it even more real, more immediate, more impactful to your audience. Okay, now you're going in chronological order. Now you're telling a story, so something happens, and the next, and the next, and the next, and the next. Whether you have to collapse a whole bunch of time down or just a little moment of time and you're trying to expand it up to really show what's happening in that time, that's important. It gets everything going. And that will get you pretty far in a story. But it won't get you all the way because there's something else that's missing. So again, going back to your story, thinking, okay, well, I'm going to tell it in chronological order. All right, so 5 years ago, there I was walking down the street. And when I walked down the street, I saw this other person. And I saw him, he saw me. And we exchanged, we talked back and forth, and came to a decision about what was going on and what we were going to do next. And that decision really kind of transformed my life there, and already in here you sense something's wrong. Sure, you got the chronology, sure things are happening one by one by one by one, but something else is missing. Again, because of the nature of time, the nature that people experience life. The challenge is the past. And the past is a big challenge in a story. Of course, not everything happens in the present. Things can happen in the past. You can learn things as a kid. You can learn things long ago. That's perfectly understandable. That's fine. So when you go back 5 years or 10 years or 20 years or 30 years or back when I was a kid, that's great. The audience is with you. And if you talk about the things that happen with your kid, that's fine. The audience gets that too. Things happen in order. Things happen chronologically. Okay, fine. And you can tell an okay story talking about the past and these are the things I did and this is what was going on. And it'll get you okay. It'll be okay. But it won't be good. Because again, of the nature of how the audience experiences life. This basic truth about life that's so obvious, but probably you haven't thought about it. Just like chronological order. Everything happens in chronological order. That's the way life goes. Another thing about life is everything happens now. Because of that, you want to take, if even things happen in the past, everything in your story should be in the present tense. Because things happen now. There's no past, there's no future, there's only right now. The past is gone. The future is yet to be. There's only right now. That's how people experience the world, right now. So if you talk about something 5 years ago, if you talk about, so well, 5 years ago I did this, I did that, I did that sort of thing, all of a sudden it becomes it's non-existent. The past is gone. The past is over. People say, oh yeah, well that was the past. Doesn't matter. The way you get the audience to understand that is use present tense. So, 5 years ago, I was walking down the street. And I'm walking down the street thinking about all the things going on, and I have this idea and that idea, and I met my friend, and already, present tense. Chronological order, yes, but present tense. I'm walking. I'm thinking about all the things that are going on. I see my friend. We chat about different things. Already, a little better. More engaging. Because not only is chronological order, it's also in the present tense. It's happening now. It's happening immediate. Just the way people experience life right now. So by making stories happen in the present tense, brings them alive, brings them immediate, makes the audience care about them. And there's one other thing too that's missing in your story, what you're currently doing. Now here you are in your story. You're doing things chronologically in your story. By telling things, one thing happened, the next thing happened, the next thing happened, the next thing happened, your audience gets it. They understand. And you think, oh, okay, all right, I'm following that. I understand that. It's good. And you're also doing things so they happen in the present tense. And that means the story has an immediate impact on your audience. Even though it happened 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, it doesn't matter how far it goes back. You bring it into the present with the tense. There I was 15 years ago. I'm walking down the street. There I was 10 years ago. I'm walking down the street. There I was 1 year ago. I'm walking down the street. Present tense. Brings it alive, makes it open up, and now you're really on your way to telling a story. Those two simple things have gotten you so far. Chronological order, present tense. The story's starting to pop. But there's one thing missing. And this is something most people do automatically, even when they're telling stories for their friends. Because that, their stories just aren't as interesting as they could be. They become more like a long narrative, more like a news story. And the people listening to it think, well, that's an interesting news story, I guess. It's going on, but there's something missing. And that's it, isn't it? When you tell these things, even when you go chronological, even when you're using the present tense, you think deep inside, there's something missing here. Something more that could be done to bring it alive, to make that connection with my audience. It's not surprising you're missing it. Most people do. And because of that, they automatically tell stories that aren't as interesting, aren't as engaging as they could be, because they're missing one simple, basic thing that they can do. Well, so they tell stories about, well, I thought I was upset and I got really angry. Oh, I was so angry at that time. Just so many things going on. And I talked with this guy and we came to some agreement. And after a while, we decided, oh, we better move on to something else. Telling stories like that without knowing what's wrong, what's missing. What's missing is dialogue. Dialogue. Whether it's internal dialogue going on in your head, or it's external dialogue between somebody else. Dialogue brings everything alive. So instead of narrating it, I got upset, I got mad, use dialogue. I was thinking, I'm furious. How could they have done that? It's outrageous that happened. I can't believe they actually did that. I am so ticked off. Dialogue makes everything immediate. It brings things not only into the present, it brings things immediately, right in the face of your audience. Back and forth dialogue can be wonderful too. External dialogue. Tim, what's the matter? John, I'm fine. Tim, you just seem a little bit upset. John, I'm fine, all right? I want to talk about it. Tim, really, tell me what's bothering you. Back and forth dialogue. That simple back and forth dialogue can all of a sudden pop it in. All of a sudden wonder, wait, what's going on? Why is Tim so upset? Why does John care? Gets people involved, gets people interested, because dialogue is the way things happen. See, chronologically is the way things happen in real life. That's the way experience life, one thing after another, so that makes a story real. And things happen right now. All there is now. Past is dead, the future hasn't been, all there is right now. So you tell things right now, it makes things alive. But things also happen in dialogue. Using dialogue is that final part that makes everything click together. So chronologically, and getting things to happen in the present tense and dialogue, make it all come together. So there you have it. If you want to tell a story, you want to make sure your story is chronological. Everything in your story has to follow an order. So anything that you mentioned first happened first. You mentioned second, happened second, third, happened third, and so on. In the order that it happened, that's the way you mention your story, because that's the way people experience life. One thing, the next thing, the next thing. To make your story immediate and impactful, chronological order, mirroring the way that life works for everybody in your audience, everybody. Make that story interesting, impactful, engaging. And people tend to experience life in the present tense. There is only now. Past is dead, the future is to be. Everything that's not now exists in your mind. So now, so you talk about things, even things in the past, 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, doesn't matter. Make sure those things are mentioned in the present tense. Present tense makes them immediate, makes them now. Even if they happened 10 years ago, by making it happen right now, or seem to happen right now, that engages the audience. Then the audience thinks, oh, it's happening now. It's immediate. It's important. It's something right here. That's the power of the now. The immediacy, the present tense. That'll engage your audience, get them interested. So you say something like, it was 10 years ago. I was walking down the street. Use the present tense. And finally, use dialogue. Back and forth dialogue. Because people don't experience life in terms of, well, I thought about that, and I thought about the other thing, and I had a few conversations with my friends. No. When people experience life is they actually think about things, they have actual conversations. Dialogue makes those apparent. Thinking, oh, I better talk to my friends about that. Wonder what Jim has to say. Jim, what do you think? Tim, I think it's a good idea. Jim, are you sure? Back and forth dialogue. Whether it's internal dialogue or external dialogue, either way it's dialogue, because that's the way people experience the world. It's the way the world is. The world is filled with dialogue. When you get those three things, chronological order, stories in the present tense, with dialogue, you will find them opening up. You'll find them popping. You'll find your audience engaged, and you finally get that interconnection you've been trying to get. You're more confident, more certain. You think, wow, this is really working. This is pretty good up here. And as you think that, as you get that confidence, that feeling of, yeah, I like this. So you get all that going, then you get certain of yourself, and you just stand more confident, more solid on stage. And by being more solid, being more certain, being more aware, you discover that stories are more impactful, are more engaging. And when you have that engagement in your audience, you get into it, then the story just comes alive for you. You relive that story. You get that story going on in your mind, your head, your body, your emotions. Everything responds to the story because you're going through it right then. And your audience goes through it too. You and your audience go through this story together. There's this merging of the speaker and the audience that takes place when you have an engaging story. And it just makes for a better speech, a more enjoyable experience on stage, more fun for your audience, just a better time overall. So if you're going to do a story, make it engaging. Go chronological. Use the present tense and use dialogue, and you're going to tell a great story.